now, ladies and gentlemen, here with tonight's top 10 list, the host of The Tonight Show. For 30 years, Johnny Carson.
For 30 years, a seat on Johnny Carson's couch was the most coveted spot in Hollywood. It was a sign that you had truly made it. But for some, that honor came with a hidden danger. Carson had a list, a secret list of guests he hated so much they would never be welcome again. From physical threats to deep personal betrayals, we're uncovering the truth behind the 8 celebrities who earned a lifetime ban from the king of late night. Rivers run dry. Joan Rivers wasn't just another comedian on The Tonight Show. She was Johnny's chosen one. In the early 1980s, Carson made her the permanent guest host, a huge deal for any comic, especially a woman in those days. What many overlooked is that their relationship was more than just professional. Carson was like a father figure to her. He helped guide her career, and she adored him for it. Their bond was deep, which is why the betrayal cut so deeply. In 1986, the new Fox network offered Joan her own late-night show, scheduled to run at the same time as Johnny's. It was a massive opportunity she couldn't refuse. The thing nobody tells you is how terrified she was to tell Johnny. She kept putting it off, trying to find the right words. But she waited too long. The news leaked to the press, and Johnny read about it in a magazine before he ever heard it from her. For a private person like Carson, this was the ultimate sign of disrespect. He felt she had gone behind his back. The fallout was immediate and total. Carson never spoke to Joan Rivers again. He banned her from the show and reportedly ordered his staff to never even mention her name. Joan tried to apologize for years, sending letters and gifts, but Carson never responded. It was a wound that never healed, and Joan wouldn't appear on The Tonight Show again until 2014, long after Johnny was gone. A personal betrayal was one thing, but a physical threat was something else entirely. Newton's law: don't mess with Johnny. Wayne Newton, also known as Mr. Las Vegas, was a frequent target of Johnny's jokes. For the most part, the jabs were harmless fun about his glitzy Vegas image. But in the early 1980s, Carson started making jokes that hinted at Newton's personal life and masculinity. To put it mildly, Newton was not amused. But instead of calling his agent to complain, Newton took matters into his own hands. He flew to California, walked into the NBC studios, and confronted Johnny Carson in his own office. According to Newton himself, he told Johnny that he could make fun of his singing or his appearance, but if he ever made another joke about his manhood, he would deal with him physically. You see, this was a line that could not be crossed with Johnny Carson. While Johnny loved to poke fun, he was also a man who valued control and safety. A direct physical threat, especially in his own office, was unforgivable. Carson, a former Navy boxer, didn't back down. He reportedly told Newton to get out before he had him thrown out. From that day forward, Wayne Newton was permanently banned from The Tonight Show. His national TV presence took a major hit afterward. The incident showed a different side of Carson. He was the king of his castle, and no one was allowed to threaten the throne. Threats were an easy reason for a ban, but sometimes just being annoying was enough. Comedy that wasn't funny. Actor Charles Grodin was known for his dry, awkward sense of humor. When he first came on The Tonight Show, he tried something different. Instead of being a charming guest, he pretended to be hostile and difficult, challenging Johnny's questions and creating a tense, funny atmosphere. At first, Johnny loved it. He was a master at playing along, and the pretend arguments between the two became a running gag that audiences enjoyed. But over time, the act started to wear thin on Carson. What many overlooked is that Grodin's fake insults sometimes hit a little too close to home. Johnny Carson was a very private man who was known to be shy and awkward in his personal life. He worked hard to create his friendly on-air persona. Grodin's jokes sometimes poked fun at that persona, suggesting Carson didn't really care about his guests. One night, Grodin went too far, questioning Johnny's sincerity on air. The smile on Carson's face grew tight. The audience might not have noticed, but the crew knew Johnny was no longer playing along. As soon as the show went to a commercial, Carson turned to his producer and said, "We're done with that." Grodin was never invited back. He was never officially told he was banned. The invitations just stopped coming. Being annoying got you ghosted, but outright disrespect got you erased from history. The night the laughter stopped, Shelley Winters was a two-time Oscar-winning actress and a Hollywood legend. She was also known for having a very big and sometimes very unpredictable personality. She had been on the show before and was always an entertaining guest with great stories. But one night in 1975, everything went wrong. The thing nobody tells you is that behind the scenes, the staff was already worried about her. Her behavior had become more and more erratic. On this particular night, Winters appeared to be intoxicated. She was slurring her words and interrupting Carson. Johnny, ever the professional, tried his best to keep the interview on track. He made a lighthearted joke about her weight, a topic she had joked about herself in the past. But this time she didn't laugh. Instead, she picked up her glass of whiskey and dumped her entire drink on the head of the other guest, Oliver Reed. The audience gasped, and Carson immediately cut to a commercial break, walked off stage, and changed his suit. Winters was quickly escorted out of the building. When the show returned, Carson finished it as if nothing had happened. But behind the scenes, he was furious. Shelley Winters was banned for life. The act was seen as the ultimate sign of disrespect to the host and the show. An on-air explosion was bad, but so was a slow, awkward fizzle, repeating the punchline. For about a decade, impressionist Rich Little was one of Johnny's favorite guests. He was a regular on the show, appearing dozens of times to do his famous impersonations of celebrities and presidents. He was reliable, funny, and the audience loved him. Then, one day, he just stopped appearing. There was no big fight, no on-air drama. Rich Little simply vanished from The Tonight Show. For years, not even Little himself knew why. The truth was, something that revealed just how seriously Carson took his job as a comedian. You see, Johnny had an incredible memory for jokes, and he started to notice that Rich Little was repeating his material. He was using the same impressions and the same punchlines he had used on the show before. To Carson, this was a sign of laziness. He believed every guest should bring their best, newest material to his stage. What many overlooked was a second reason. Off camera, Little would often stay in character, doing his impressions constantly. This apparently annoyed the very private Carson, who preferred real conversation when the cameras were off. Johnny never told Little he was banned. He just told his staff to stop booking him. It was a quiet banishment, but it was permanent. Carson had no patience for unprofessional behavior, especially when it came to being sober. A tragic interview. Truman Capote was one of the most brilliant writers of his generation, famous for books like In Cold Blood and Breakfast at Tiffany's. His sharp wit made him a fantastic talk show guest in the 1960s and 70s. But by the late 70s, Capote was struggling badly with personal demons and addiction. His final appearance on The Tonight Show in 1978 was a heartbreaking disaster. From the moment he walked on stage, it was clear something was terribly wrong. He was unsteady, and his speech was so slurred he could barely form a sentence. Carson, who was a friend of Capote's, looked visibly uncomfortable. He tried to steer the conversation with simple questions, but Capote was incoherent, rambling about personal matters that were not fit for television. The thing nobody tells you is how protective Carson was of his show's dignity. He saw it as an embarrassment to both the audience and to Capote himself. He cut the interview short after just a few painful minutes. After the show, a deeply saddened Carson banned Truman Capote from ever appearing again. It wasn't done out of anger, but out of a sense of respect. He didn't want to see his friend embarrass himself on national television again. Carson disliked public embarrassment, and he especially disliked public political debates. The political firestorm. In the turbulent world of the late 1960s and early 1970s, two powerful forces in entertainment stood on opposite sides of a cultural divide. On one side was Johnny Carson, the undisputed king of late night. His stage on The Tonight Show was a sanctuary, a place where millions of Americans could escape the daily barrage of news about the Vietnam War and social unrest. Carson's rule was simple: keep it light. He skillfully poked fun at politicians from every party, but never planted a flag, believing his sacred duty was to provide a break from the world's problems, not to amplify them. On the other side were Tom and Dick Smothers, the folk-singing comedy duo whose own hit show had been famously canceled for being too political. They were heroes of the counterculture, believing that a platform as powerful as television had a responsibility to challenge authority and speak truth to power. For them, silence was complicity, and they saw every microphone as an opportunity to fight for their anti-war cause. When these two worlds collided on Carson's show, the result was a legendary showdown. The Smothers Brothers came on as guests, but they had no intention of engaging in the usual celebrity small talk. In an act of calculated defiance, Tom Smothers hijacked the interview, turning it into a passionate rally against the war. The air in the studio grew thick with tension. Johnny Carson, the master of ceremonies, had been ambushed on his own turf. He felt they had deceived him, using his carefully crafted haven of entertainment as their personal soapbox. While Carson remained a consummate professional on camera, navigating the segment to its end, his fury backstage was immense. There was no dramatic on-air ban. Instead, the consequences were colder and more effective. The Smothers Brothers were put on a secret blacklist. For years, the invitations simply stopped coming. On the rare occasion they were allowed to return, it came with a stern, non-negotiable warning from the producers: do not talk about politics. They had broken Johnny Carson's cardinal rule, and he would never forget it. Johnny valued civility, and our final guest was the king of confrontation. The king versus the jester. In the wild landscape of late 1980s television, Morton Downey Jr. was a force of nature. He was the original shock jock, a chain-smoking, loudmouthed brawler who had turned the talk show into a combat sport. His program, The Morton Downey Jr. Show, was an explosion of noise and manufactured rage. It was loud, obnoxious, and filled with yelling. He would deliberately blow smoke in his guests' faces and encourage his studio audience, nicknamed the Loudmouths, to scream and shout down anyone he disagreed with. He was the absolute antithesis of everything the king of late night, Johnny Carson, stood for. In 1988, at the absolute peak of his controversial fame, Downey was booked on The Tonight Show. It was a collision of worlds, the chaos merchant invited into the court of the king. From the moment he walked out, the appearance was a disaster. Downey completely ignored the unwritten rules of being a guest on Carson's stage. He immediately started playing to the crowd, treating the iconic set like it was his own personal playground. He interrupted Johnny repeatedly, made aggressive, borderline incoherent comments, and desperately tried to turn the interview into the kind of shouting match that defined his own show. Johnny Carson, the undisputed master of cool, refused to take the bait. He understood that engaging with Downey on his level would be a loss. Instead, he sat back with a tight, knowing smile, a mask of professionalism barely concealing his seething contempt. He let Downey have the stage, allowing the man's abrasive personality to become his own undoing. Carson gave him just enough rope, and Downey eagerly used it to make a fool of himself in front of millions. To Carson, this wasn't just a bad guest. It was the death of intelligent conversation playing out live on his show. The moment the segment ended and the show cut to a commercial break, Carson's verdict was swift and absolute. He made it crystal clear to his producers that Morton Downey Jr. would never, under any circumstances, be invited back. The ban was more than just a reaction to a rude guest. It was a powerful statement. Downey represented a new, aggressive, and simplistic style of television that Carson fundamentally hated. As long as Johnny was the king of late night, there was no room for that kind of behavior in his court. It was a line in the sand, drawn by the most powerful man in television. These stories show that behind the curtain, the king of late night ruled with an iron fist. Was Carson right to protect his show, or did he let his personal grudges go too far? Let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe.